Okay. And I want to welcome Elizabeth Gonzalez, who's on her iPhone there. She'll be signing up with the brokerage this today or tomorrow, I guess. We got to just get her the paperwork, but we invited her to this session, and she is going to sit in starting on Monday with the 100 Days to Greatness training too. Heather, you might do one last promo for that before you start your reports. I do want to share, I'm going to start, let Heather start the meeting today because she has some interesting and important information she brought back from the CAR directors meeting last week. As you may know, Heather, are you the president of the chapter now, the NORBAR?
No, I'm not the president. I'm on the North Bay Board of Directors and the California Association Board of Directors. Yeah, but not president.
All right. And some of us have done that volunteer duty in the past, and it's very valuable. It adds to your knowledge of the business and what's going on. And Heather's going to share some of that she brought back from the state meetings this morning. There's a BERIS annual meeting coming up in 2 weeks, I think, and try to attend that. It's our MLS, and I'm the treasurer of BERIS actually now, and they've got me making a treasurer's report, so I can tell you all about that. Anyway, I want to, before starting with Heather, I want to share this. Can you all see the invitation there? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Haley tells me we don't have a whole lot of RSVPs as of this date, and March 16th is the deadline to RSVP because we need to know how many people to supply lunch for and refreshments at the Santa Rosa Golf Club on March 24th. So this is a company-sponsored event. We're going to have a special presentation from Sherry Chris, the head of Better Homes and Gardens on a national basis. And we'll have a guest speaker and other fun things going on. And those who received awards for the year will be recognized. So if you haven't RSVP'd, if you're one of those who are kind of waiting, just send Haley an email here, haley.anderson@winecountrygroup.com. Put it down in your calendar. It's always a fun event, and you get to intermingle with our agents from different offices and network. It's always a good networking event, and it's fun. So please do that. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Heather, to cover your report. Do you have any visuals? I did put you on as a co-host, so if you have anything to pull up.
Oh yeah, in a minute I'll pull up the CAR website and go over a few things there. But real quick, Gary, am I right? Is there an voting for BERIS that's happening right now that people need to go in and vote, or do you know?
Yeah, there are ballots out there, electronic ballots for you to vote for your BERIS directors. I don't think there are any contested positions, but we do need a quorum to vote the directors in. So we need a minimum number of votes, and sometimes it's hard on a remote basis to get those votes. So if you get a notice from BERIS to cast your ballot for directors, please do so, and it makes life easier for our staff there and all that good stuff.
Yeah, perfect. That's what I was thinking. I think I know a notice went out maybe a couple of weeks ago even. So if you have, you want to go back into your emails and just look for BERIS voting. I'm not sure what the title was, but that would be helpful. Right. Great. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so I am on the board of directors for North Bay Association as well as for California Association of Realtors. And I think often we forget how much they are doing for us as realtors, and how, you know, the associations are really there to make the business of being a realtor better in a lot of different ways. So a big, huge part of what they do is a lot of political action. So there is often legislation that they're either supporting that is pro home ownership, or that they're working against that's, you know, that's negative for home ownership. They also do a lot to support different political candidates, and work with the candidates or the politicians that are more pro home ownership to make sure that they're you know, voting in ways that are going to support home ownership. For instance, right now, if you don't know, in Petaluma, there is I don't think it's been voted on yet, but there's a proposed rental increase cap for rentals, which is going to be huge. And what happens in Sonoma County, and maybe it keeps going north, I don't know, often when one city adopts something, then the other cities start doing it, and it's really going to impact. It's, you know, San Francisco has some of the rentals there, the payments on the monthly rent income is so low because of those rental caps. So that's not even the right word, but just keep your ear out for things like that, because North Bay Association and CAR are really working on those. And I'm going to go over a couple things that are going to be coming up. First, I just wanted to go over a little bit. I'm our regional rep for the Professional Development and Education Committee. Now, there's like, I don't know, 50 different committees. I don't know, maybe not that many. And so, you know, each director goes to several of those at the meetings. So I went to that one. Something to remember from that is that there are free license renewal courses. So if your license is coming up for renewal, you can go into the CAR website and get those courses completely for free. So you don't need to go out and pay for them somewhere. There, in the last year, 2 classes have been added. One's fair housing and one's on implicit bias. I thought the implicit bias class was really good. It really opened my eyes to several things. If you're one of those people who actually took your courses, your renewal courses in advance, and now you're up for renewal, you can go in and just take those 2 courses because they are required now. So you would have to just go in, but you can take those on their own. They are creating, and it'll be out soon, they also have classes for getting your license, and they're going to be providing a link for us that we can provide that to people at a discount. So if you know someone who's thinking about getting their license, you can share that link for them and they get a discount on those courses. So, you know, it's kind of a great way if you know someone who's thinking about getting their license and you want to have them join you here at BHG, that would be a good thing to do. The big issues at the board of directors, the last thing of the week is the actual board of directors meeting, where there's everything that's been proposed and we vote on it and decide what's going to be, you know, where funds are going to go and what issues are going to be dealt with and all those kind of things. So a few things that came up is there is, in part of CAR is there's a smaller organization called Californians for Home Ownership. And what they do is they use litigation to try to support home ownership. So they do things like what they're supporting is, one, housing affordability and making sure that communities are allowing the development of more housing. So, you know, because we know California has such a shortage of homes. And so that's one thing they're doing. And they do that through a few different things. They do housing element lawsuits. So like if a community has either zoning or land use laws that don't allow for more building in ways that California should be allowing, then they'll go in and try to deal with the small communities on that. They do the CEQA interventions. So that's the California Environmental Quality Act. So if there's a, you know, if a development is being stopped because of some environmental factor, they'll go in and try to help mitigate, like what can we do to make it so that we can do the development and still take care of the environment. And they also support new laws. Let's see what else. I got a little list here. There's a new legislation coming out, which is called AB 62. And that is, it's proposed to increase the amount of above and below ground water storage in California. You know, when we're in years of drought, there's just not enough water. And so CAR voted to support that legislation. It's AB 62, and it would increase the storage capacity in California to 3.7 million acre feet by the year 2030 and 4 million acre feet by the year 2040. So that's an important one. I can't imagine why it wouldn't get passed. I don't know where the funding's coming from yet, but that's something to just keep your eye out for. Kind of interesting, there's on the fair housing front, CAR is sponsoring legislation, which is going to provide educational resources for low and moderate income homeowners to learn about living trusts. So learn about the benefits and how to, you know, get their property and create a trust for themselves. So that'll be really great, because that's, you know, so many people don't know about that. So they're sponsoring legislation for that. So you'll be seeing that at some point. Let's see. In June, we'll be having more new forms. The standard forms advisory is going to be releasing another 45 forms. 25 of those, though, are going to be just revised property management forms. So won't have a lot of impact on a lot of us, but there'll be 20 that we'll be keeping an eye out for. I'm sure Gary will go over those when they come out. And something that's really great is concerning the natural hazard disclosure. You probably, well, I didn't know this. The way that the natural hazard disclosure, that main page on that page is statutorily prescribed. It's a statutorily prescribed document. It has to be exactly that way with that information on it. So they can't just add and subtract from it, right? The NHD companies. Right now, there's nothing on there that talks about the defensible space mandates for parcels that are located in those high fire hazard severity zones. And that's why there's a lot of that confusion about when we need to do the, I forget what the form is, when we need to do it and when we don't. And so they are sponsoring legislation to just update that NHD document. So it would, if it passes, then it will include that information right on that main page for us. So hoping that passes. Any questions on any of those things? All right, I am going to share my screen. There was a ton of conversation.
I had a question.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't see. Yeah.
It's all right. I couldn't get my mute off.
Oh, no worries.
You're talking about the natural, not the fire advisory. You're talking about the natural hazards.
Yes. So the natural hazard disclosure, if this passes, will have a very clear place on it that will tell you that you need to or don't need to do the fire hazard disclosure. Does that make sense? I forget what that was called.
Sure does.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
they're just trying to update the NHD for the information we currently need on it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions or anything? I am going to share my screen. As you can imagine, there was a lot of conversation about the settlement between the Department of Justice and NAR, and protecting our rights as agents, all of that. Out of that, there was a lot of discussion on the use of the buyer broker agreement or the buyer representation agreement. The CAR, there was a lot of energy to push for legislation to require that all agents use that, and CAR voted not to support that legislation at this time, but just an awareness that there's energy back there for possibly doing something like that in the future. But what CAR did do, and you guys, hopefully have all seen it, they updated the buyer broker agreement, the buyer representation agreement, and there's a place for it in the RPA now where you can check that you have one and how you want, if that's going to be included. Gary's gone over that some, and he'll probably go over it in the future as well. the legal hotline said that's one of the biggest questions they're getting right now. So just, it's a good idea to look through that. So if it ever comes up and you want to have that information to talk with someone about, and if you're going to be using it, you want to make sure you're using it, understanding it, using it correctly, of course. Okay, I just brought up the CAR website. You guys know this is how you get to your zip forms. I think a lot of people, that's the only time we go on CAR is just to get to write an offer, right? But there's a lot more here, right?
Heather, could I
yeah.
interject for a sec? So is the controversy that CAR voted not to do is to make it mandatory to have a buyer rep agreement? That's what I got. Okay.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
All right.
Yeah, yes, because their concern is that that legislation might come from elsewhere, like that. Okay, we want to force agents to have that, for more transparency. And so they said, no, we're not gonna push for it right now, because as soon as you write legislation, who knows what else is gonna get put in with it, and it gets to be a big mess. So they're just kind of preparing with making sure there's a really great contract for it and those sort of things. So
Well, it will at least take away the difficulty that many of us have with telling the buyer they have to sign an agreement.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So there was a lot of advocacy for using that agreement. So, and in some areas it's very common. I feel like here it's not as common, but it is an option out there. So,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, you bet. Okay, on the top here of the CAR website, you, I'm sure, are familiar with the Transaction Center. That is where you access your zip forms. Learn and Thrive here is where you're going to go in to get your 45 hours of license renewal courses. There's a whole bunch of other courses as well. There's designations and certifications. This is where the pre-license training is too. If you want to invite someone, like I said, there'll be a link for that coming up to give them a discount, but I don't know when it's coming. But something I wanted to point out here is this Industry 360. Industry 360 degrees has 3 sections to it. It has a whole section on market data. It has a section here on the MLS and professional standards, and some political advocacy, which I talked about. So let's just pop over to political advocacy. I talked already about how there is so much political advocacy going on by CAR and NORBAR to help us. If you ever want to look into any of that, you can come right here to see what legislation is currently on the docket. And you can go here if you want to get involved with any of that. There is coming up in May is the legislative day, which is a day when at least 40 or more agents, realtors from Sonoma County go to, and they try to get people from all over the state, go to Sacramento, and where we really lobby the politicians there and talk to them about homeownership rights. So that's coming up in May. It's very cool opportunity. There's a stipend if you're interested in going, that will pay for your, your expenses to go. And it's actually a really fun day. There's a lunch, and you really get to learn a lot about kind of what's going on in the political arena concerning homeownership. There's also a program that NORBAR is offering, which is called Emerging Leaders. If you have any interest in like legislative day or getting more involved in the political scene, just let me know. You can apply to the Emerging Leaders program, and then your whole thing is paid for that day. I think they do 2 Emerging Leaders a year, and you go to the legislative day, and it's a great experience where you get to, you sit in small rooms and talk to our representatives. So
Did you say NORBAR?
yes.
That NORBAR offers that?
Yes,
Or-
yeah, NORBAR
okay.
offers that to our members. Yep.
Okay.
And then just for Lake County real quick, because I'm a
Yeah.
board member on the Lake County Realtors, we are,
Thank you.
yes, you're welcome. We are for Ledge Week trying to get a bus and get the Lake
Awesome.
County agents that day to join
Cool.
us and go on the bus and go over on Wednesday. Karina and I are talking about going on Tuesday because they have a street fair and all this other fun stuff.
Mhm.
The day before that we want to go and have fun, and then get to business on Wednesday.
Cool.
But anyways, yeah, it's going to be real fun, and we're planning on going here.
Awesome. I'm so
Yeah.
glad to hear it. That's great. That's great. I'll be there. So yeah, if anybody's interested in that, it is a really, really good opportunity. So thank you. Okay, we're gonna pop over here. The middle one's professional standards here. If you want to go see the code of ethics, this talks about code of ethics violators. It's kind of interesting. It actually has people that have violated the code of ethics. Can be an interesting read for sure. If you ever have a situation where you're thinking someone's violated the code of ethics, definitely talk to Gary or Randy. There's steps to take in order to, if you want to submit that someone has violated that. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to show here is this market data page. It's got some great stuff for you. The housing market forecast, they did that back in October. It's a whole hour and a half video about what they were planning, thinking is going to happen in 2023. There's a great podcast here. So if you're driving and you want to, the more we are hearing about real estate, talking about real estate, the more we get it into our language, the better we're able to explain it to our clients. And so this podcast is a great way to listen to it when you're on a long drive or what have you, to keep yourself abreast of what's going on. And then this is kind of cool. This over here on the right, interactive market stats. There's shareable reports and some interactive dashboards here. You can do like this housing market overview. There is things by county market update, but let me just show you like this buyer's guide. It's not actually a full buyer's guide, but it gives you, let's see if it's going to catch up. This actually, you can pull up market data by city right in here, and it will do a little infographic for you that you can copy and paste. You can put it in on, on social media or what have you. I don't know why it's not coming. Oh, there it goes. Oh, says took too long to respond. We'll see if we get it. It's obviously not in our branding, but I always, I've been working with a coach. He says done is better than perfect, right? So if we're getting stuff out there and you just want to get something out there quickly, this is a great little resource for you. Doesn't look like it's going to come up right now for whatever reason, but it's really simple. You'll see it comes up and you just click on, there's a little link button, and yeah, it's not coming up. And then you pick what city you want to be in. So take advantage of those things and let me know if you have any questions or want to see any changes in our association.
That's great, Heather. Could you go back to the homepage just 1 minute and share that again?
Yeah.
Um,
The CAR homepage. This one?
yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Since I'm a director and I'm an old guy, or you're a director and I'm an old guy, been in the business a long time, I'm wanting my picture in this chair. So you need to find out how I can get my picture in the chair. Okay.
Okay, I will ask.
It's actually the deadline for the application already expired. Sorry.
What?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I applied. I'm waiting to see if I'm gonna make it.
What's that, an annual application?
I don't know. I just saw the email come in and said the deadline's coming up soon. I think it was the end of February or something to do the application.
Bummer.
Oh, well, they all look very uncomfortable for me, but maybe we can get Gary a special like compensation for coming in late or something.
For being a member since 1976 or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I always, when I log on, I always look at that and say, yeah, I don't want my picture in there. I won't be wearing heels,
Did you?
but maybe I'll wear a beret, Curtis. Yes. Anyway, let's see some things I have to cover. Thanks, Heather. That was great update. We had a question on referral fees this week. And I think you all know I love referrals. Our group, even between our inner offices, we do a fair amount of referrals. We refer to Lake County, we refer to Humboldt County, they refer to us down here. That's another reason to network with their other agents, because you get to meet them and they say when they have a buyer need in an area where they don't want to travel to, they find one of our other agents to make a referral. And referrals are typically 25% of the buyer side commission, well, by the commission side, whether you're sending a seller or a buyer. So I'd like to tell a story of one of our agents, Herb Heil, who had a walk-in in Sonoma one year, and they just walked in on the plaza. They wanted to look at $3 million homes. They went out and spent one day, and they looked at 5 homes or so. And then they said, well, we're going to go down to the Carmel area and look around down there. And he said, well, do you have an agent in Carmel? And they said, no. And they said, well, let me find someone to refer you to. So he went through our network and we found an agent in Carmel, and he gave them the name and number, and they called them and they set up appointments. Well, about 3 months later, a check comes in the mail for $25,000 to her because they bought a $3 million home. And you know, they didn't tell him they were buying the home, but the referral agreement was out there, and they bought the home, and Herb said it was the most he's ever worked for on an dollar per hour basis. You know, so we do a lot of transactions where we work for, you know, very little per hour that we put into it. But there's one where referrals are one where you can get a very good return on just making a phone call or two. So referrals. And we use the standard CAR referral form now. We used to have our own, but we don't, you know, the CAR form works fine for us. So if you have a referral, go on Zip Forms, pull up the referral form, fill it out. It gets signed by the broker or manager of your office, and it's good business. It's another income stream that we don't want to forget about. Okay, probably the most interesting case we've had this week was a issue come up this week. It has to do with an offer on an unlisted property. And so one of our agents had a client who was in town from out of town and wanted to buy a home. Well, the agent who has this client was on vacation overseas. So he arranged for another of our agents to take them out and show them properties. Well, they went out and spent the day, and they looked at several homes, and then the agent who was helping them says, you know, I have a listing that's expired in December. It came off the market, but we're going to bring it back on next month. So maybe you'd like to see that. And, you know, after spending some time with them, she thought it might fit their needs. And sure enough, they liked the house. They went to see the house and they liked it. So this is an unlisted property at this point. And because it was unlisted, our agent who was helping out said, well, why don't you just wait till, you know, your agent gets back from their vacation, because we got time here. It's not going to come on the market right away. And then they can write it up for you and represent you like, you know, they originally started to. Well, whatever happened, you know, sometimes buyers get a little crazy, they get anxious, whatever happened. They were just staying with some friends, and the friend says, well, you like the house, you should write an offer on it. And we have this friend, you know, who's an agent with this other company, and why don't you just have them write the offer up? So all of a sudden we get an offer on this property from an outside company. Well, that's all well and good, and we give it to our seller, and the seller likes the offer, and they want to accept the offer with, you know, very few changes. But you know, it's not, you know, it wasn't listed, so there's no compensation agreement for this buyer's representative. And our agent asked the buyer's representative, well, you know, you didn't show the property, you haven't even been here with them, and we were going to, you know, the agent who was out of town was going to represent them. So, you know, maybe you should take a referral fee. So, you know, and our agent can step back into the saddle when they get back in town. And this other agent says, no, I'm going to represent them. You know, I wrote the offer. So this is a time when I'm glad we have Bill and Shannon as our risk property manager, you know, attorneys, because we call the attorneys and say, what do we deal with this thing now? And since there's no commission offer through the MLS, and the agent didn't present a commission, a cooperating broker commission agreement, where the commission would be spelled out, even though they wrote the offer, they're essentially not entitled to any compensation. So we said, well, our attorney said, well, let's wait and see if they send the offer back and it gets accepted, and then we'll deal with the agent and the brokerage on the other side. And that's essentially what's happened. Our next steps, we got the accepted offer, counter offer back, so we have a ratified contract, but there's no commission agreement signed with the party that brought in the buyer. So the next step will be, I know the broker who's representing, you know, who manages that agent, and I'll call that broker and explain the situation and express that, you know, what might be fair in this situation is that agent receive a referral fee and our agent take over when they get back from vacation. And we'll see where it goes. But the lesson for us all, there's two lessons here. If you're writing an offer on an unlisted property, be sure to attach a commission, cooperating broker commission agreement with that offer, so that you're protected and you're going to get paid for what you're doing. The second lesson here is that when buyers are interested in writing an offer, probably we should go ahead and do that. You know, when the buyer says, I really like this house and I want to write an offer, we don't say, well, why don't you wait till next week when your agent gets back in town? Because they may just wander off like this one did and find their own agent, or they go to another open house and you don't have a buyer or broker agreement with them, and they just write an offer, and we're as the saying goes, SOL. So you know, if that opportunity comes up, you can always go back and say, okay, I'll write the offer up for you now, and I'm going to hand it off to the other agent, you know, your agent, when they get back in town, and that's how we'll handle it. So, but go ahead and write the offer up when the buyer expresses interest. Yeah, Sharon.
It's sounding from the other meeting that we had on the with the legal department, that this is becoming more and more common, having the agreement with the buyer, whereas in the past it was, you know, rarely heard of having that kind of agreement. Is that
Yeah,
sounds like it's true.
We didn't really grow up, if you will, in the business doing buyer broker agreements. They came about through many, there's other states, Florida, I think, Minnesota, I think, that require agents who, if they're going to work with a buyer, they are required to do a buyer broker agreement as part of their DRE regulations. And that's what Heather was referring to, that there's a legislation, there's a growing groundswell by some people that we should be that kind of state too. So that may eventually occur. And I think for all of us, new agents particularly, we should adopt that buyer broker's agreement as a standard practice as much as possible. So if you're starting to work with a buyer, say, hey, this is a form our company likes to use that expresses how we represent you as a buyer and how we get compensated. Because what happens many times is buyers don't know how we get compensated. You know, we never sit down and explain to them, you know, what we're going to be paid and by whom. And in the long run, who's paying for all of the commissions in the transaction? Now, they're coming out of the seller's side of the escrow, right? But who's actually paying for them? The buyer, because they're in the purchase price. So it's the buyer's money and the buyer's loan money that's gone in to the escrow, that's gone to the seller, and then the seller pays the commission. So it's really all the buyer, and the buyer's, you know, one of the problems is the buyer doesn't know what the commission is. You know, it's all between the seller and the listing agent and the selling agent. So that's part of the lawsuits that are out there right now, is that the proponents of those lawsuits are saying the buyer doesn't know what they're paying for, that they're having to pay a 6% commission. So
Gary?
they should, yes.
Sorry, can you just give a brief something on the history of why the commission, why the agreement for the listing side has always been around, or been around for a long time, and why not for the buyers? I mean, what has kind of led us into the direction of where we've been, I guess, is the question, because I know different states do it differently.
Yeah, and it used to be different even in the MLS, because there was no, the reason we have a separate MLS in Sonoma County is back in the 1970s, I believe, there was a lawsuit that was at the national level. And at that time, there was no offer of compensation to a cooperating agent. The seller, the leasing agent would make an agreement, but then there was no offer of compensation to a cooperating broker. And so the cooperating broker was just kind of flying out there with no, with no safety net. So that it kind of led to they were calling it a monopoly on the part of the MLS, because the MLS had the information, but they weren't sharing it. So that caused in some areas and in Sonoma County, if they said, well, we're going to get sued, let's separate the MLS from the association. And our MLS is owned by the brokers who are members. And it's a little different from the membership in NORBAR. But most of the associations kept their MLSs. Marin has their own MLS. Lake County has their own MLS. I think there's only 3 MLSs in the state that are independent of the associations. So the associations have adapted to this, and now they offer compensation in the remarks, but the public doesn't see those remarks. Now, recently we had to change. Remember, now it's in the public remarks, so it's being offered to the cooperating agent. That's because of these lawsuits that are coming up. And we have some brokerages, particularly one we're aware of in Lake County, that's only offering $1 in cooperating commission on their listings. Now, why they're doing this, we aren't quite sure. They say they're doing it to keep out of lawsuits, but we think maybe they're doing it because they can go to the seller and say, well, you don't have to pay the buyer's commission. But in reality, in those situations, the practice is that we go to with a buyer, a commission, cooperating broker commission agreement in those transactions up front, and say, okay, we're bringing an offer. It's subject to this commission agreement. And the seller says, okay, yeah, I like your offer, and I'll pay that extra commission anyway. But I think the sellers ended up paying the commissions because they generally are the ones with liquid funds in the transaction. Because our lending industry has been willing to recognize commissions as the cost of purchasing a home. So when we say the home's worth $500,000, and then that includes a 6% commission of $30,000, the home is really worth $470,000, but there's a $30,000 commission tacked on it to it, and we say it's a $500,000 home. Well, it's really a $470,000 home with a $30,000 commission. But the lending industry has been willing to say, oh no, it's a $500,000 home, and we'll give you 80% of $500,000. So they're basically loaning 80% of the commission, as well as loaning on the house. So that's how it's come about. Someone could do a better job describing it than that, probably. But I think it is leading down the path that we're going to be using more and more of these buyer-broker agreements. And we should get familiar with what the forms say, first of all, and then familiar, we'll continue to do training, but familiar with how to present these forms to our buyer clients. Because, like you said, Yvonne, we get uncomfortable when we ask a buyer who we don't really know very well to sign a legal document. Say, here, you're going to pay me if the seller doesn't pay me. Well, the form also says if the seller does pay me, then you don't have to pay me. So, we have to get used to explaining that. Okay. We will spend more time on that issue over time. Another question came up this week, had to do with the SIP form. This was also interesting. The offer, we were representing the seller. The offer came in and the seller liked the offer. They want to accept it, but they wanted 14 days after close of escrow to occupy the home so they could clear their stuff out, et cetera, as sellers often do. So the seller countered, our client countered that they wanted these 14 days. And the buyer accepted that. Okay. Now, the offer said, talked about the 14 days, but it didn't say, and the party shall execute a SIP form, seller in possession form, which let me pull up, let's see, where are we? Gonna get rid of that. Pull up this. Are you seeing my screen now? No, I'm not on share anymore. Okay. Let me go back here. All right. So it says you can see my screen. So let's hope that's right.
We can see it now.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to the RPA here, the residential purchase agreement. And we'll go down this section, close that. Okay. M3. Now we're in the grid here, okay? So we're in paragraph 3, which we popularly call the grid. And when we get down to paragraph 3M, it deals with possession. M1 is time of possession, M2 is seller occupied or vacant units, and M3 has to do with occupied units by tenant or anyone other than seller. So here we got under M2, seller occupied units, and then it has check boxes for how many days, if it's 29 or fewer, 30 or more. And then it has these additional terms, which are terms of the contract. These aren't just advising terms. These are actual contractual terms. The parties are committed to it. And it says CAR form SIP is attached if 29 or fewer days, and CAR form RLAS is attached if 30 more days. Well, in this case, essentially, it was like the buyer put in an offer and they said 14 days. And that requires a SIP to be used. Now, they didn't say that because it was in the counteroffer, but terms of the counteroffer automatically become terms of the offer, right? So if we've all of a sudden adopted this, it's just the same as if the offer written with this checkbox in 14 days, and therefore the SIP has to be used. Now, the interesting situation was here that the buyer, we're representing the buyer, I'm sorry. So the seller asks this and our buyer says, okay, I agree to it. And then the seller's agent prepared the SIP form. And then we gave that to our client, the buyer. And he says, I don't want to sign that. He says, well, why don't you want to sign it? It's here to protect you. he says, no, I don't like word possession. You know, I don't like the seller's keeping possession. I'm buying the house, I'm paying for the house, and I don't like the fact that the seller's keeping possession. And so it was kind of semantics. And our agent called us and said, well, the buyer doesn't want to sign it. And we said, well, we think he's contractually bound to sign it by that paragraph M3, 3M3 or 3M2, and it's to his benefit. So, I mean, if we can't explain it to him, why don't you offer to put him on the phone call with Randy or me and manager or somebody, and we'll try to explain it, and maybe we can get through to him a little better. And then before that happened, she sent back a form again with some other forms, and it pointed out that because this is complicated, but the buyer wanted to move into a yurt during those that's on the property during the 14 days. So, and the seller agreed to that in the SIP form. So he said, hey, listen, it gives you the right to go and move into the yurt. So sign the SIP form, which the buyer eventually did. But anyway, remember, if often we don't get that request from the seller. The buyer doesn't cover the seller's request for occupancy after close of escrow, and it does come out in a counter offer, and it does become part of the terms of the offer, and therefore the SIP or the RLAS should be used. And it protects everybody. It protects the buyer and the seller. It's a good form. Any questions on that? Okay. We have a situation where we're representing a buyer. The sellers sent over their documentation for the buyer, a home inspection, the TDS, all these things. And the buyer has, under the terms of the RPA, how many days does the buyer have to return those and acknowledge that they've received those? Hold up your hand. Show me how many days.
Sorry, I
5.
didn't hear the question.
I think it's 5. It might be 7, but it's spelled out in paragraph, our favorite paragraph 14, that the seller has so many days, I think 3 days to deliver them, and the seller has 5 or 7, or the buyer has 5 or 7 days to acknowledge receipt. Okay. Now, so
I believe it's 5.
okay, thank you, Elizabeth. See, she remembers from her training. Okay, very good. Thank you. So we've got these forms. Our buyer doesn't have a computer. She has a cell phone, but doesn't have a computer. So we're trying to do all these DocuSign documents like we like to do on her cell phone, and it's a little cumbersome. Now the buyer is going to, potentially cancel within her timeframes, and she had the right to cancel still. And the question was, well, do we have to provide all these documents, these acknowledgements, because she's going to cancel anyway? And I don't know the legal answer to that, but I for it's a practical matter, I'd say no. Let's not do that. It's too much trouble. It'll take too much time. She's going to cancel. If the seller or the seller's agent asks for the forms, then let's deal with it then. But I would just plug, write up the cancellation agreement, send it along, and be done with it. Move on to another house or whatever you're going to do. So that's yet to be resolved, but that's the position we've taken on that for now. Any comments or questions? We have a question out right now, and I won't point out because our agent's on the call, but unless she wants to volunteer, but we were going to legal counsel asking about this. This is an interesting question too, and I've yet to hear back from Bill on this. But the situation is we're representing a seller who is is a trust attorney or is represented by a trust attorney. And that trust attorney's request, the seller's request, our counteroffer to the buyer asked that they not provide us with any reports that they obtained during the course of the escrow. Now, I don't know the reason why or not, but that's what they asked for, and we put it in the counteroffer, and the buyer agreed. So the buyers agreed not to send us any of the reports, even though under the RPA, the seller's entitled to them. They don't want them. Now, I don't know why, but they don't want them. And this was the attorney who told them, telling us this. Okay. So now what happens is the buyer sends them to us. Even though they agreed not to, the buyer's agent sent them to us. So the question now becomes, can we just send them back because the contract said we weren't going to get them? We aren't going to read them. We're just going to send them back and say, we contractually didn't want these, and we're giving them back to you. Or do we fall under Bill's favorite term, and that is, we have it, we got to give it. That means if this buyer quits the contract, are we then bound, because we got these, to give them to a future buyer? So I'm waiting on feedback on that. But in the meantime, I would say don't look at the reports. I'm not going to look at the reports as broker. I don't know if our agent has already read through the reports or not, but I would say just stick them over there on the side and see if we can't return them without looking at them, and then we don't have them. Okay. So I'm waiting for legal feedback on that.
So Gary, this was my situation.
Yeah, I didn't want
And
to.
it's okay. Yeah, and I just immediately told the TC, don't send anything to the seller, and let's let Gary tell us what he thinks. So, yeah.
Okay, well, it's currently it went out to Bill this morning. I'm waiting for feedback,
Great.
and I'll
Thank you.
let you know. Okay. And the final thing I have today has to do with open houses, and I'm going to go share screen again, and let's go to desktop and go to Safari, and we're going to go to our favorite broker's risk management website. Okay, so because we pay the fees to Broker Risk Management to have them as our consultant, we get to log on to this website. And okay, not letting me log on. Oh, there we are. And you can see the username is BHGWCG. If you haven't written that down yet, write it down. And our password is let me put it up here so you can see it. BONITA, Bonita. I didn't choose it, but that's our password. So you should have this information. And now we're logged into Broker Risk Management website. And under these client resources here, this is where the training modules are, and you can watch the videos of the webinars. So this new webinar that we just did last week is up there in their training videos. We can also look at weekly practice tips. You know, I send you out a weekly practice tip because they send me a weekly practice tip every week. But we have old ones. So the question was on open houses, and our agent asked, can we hold an open house that's listed by another broker? Okay. And there's conveniently a practice tip on this. And it's called the pitfalls of holding open houses for other brokers' listings. And here we go. So the short of it is, not only is this practice prohibited by the Department of Real Estate, it creates a significant risk to the agents and the brokers. So I sent the copy of this to our agent, and I said, that's a no-go. No, we can't hold open houses for listings that are listed by another broker. So agents should refrain from this practice. Number one in dark print, DRE prohibits agents from one brokerage holding open houses for agents from another brokerage. This is pretty clear to me that this is something we don't want to do. So that was the short answer on the open houses. Okay, well, that's all I have for this week. Anyone have any questions or want to cover any of the information?
I would,
Okay, go
Gary,
ahead.
I would love to. I forgot, you told me to, but I forgot to talk about the 100 Days to Greatness when I first started.
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I see several of you on here are already signed up. 100 Days to Greatness is starting on Monday. It is a really fantastic training. We've done it one other time. It's done by Brian Buffini, and he is a fantastic real estate agent coach. The way it's going to work is there are online modules that we'll all watch. We'll watch the first one together, but then we'll watch them on our own between classes. And then we'll come together on Mondays from 1 to 2:30. There'll be a portion that is online where we'll all work together. And then what I'm hoping is that there'll be a few people in each office that will then work together on implementing whatever we are working on. There's a part on a buyer presentation, your listing presentation, all sorts of things. And then you will work together with the people in your office to practice those things. So it's a really great opportunity. It is $395. So there is a cost up front, but the company is really confident that this is going to improve your business. So if you complete the whole course and at your next transaction, they will reimburse you in your next escrow. So if you have any questions about it, I sent out yesterday, I think I sent out the link to register again. I think it's just a fantastic training. So don't hesitate. And I think there could potentially even be opportunity if you want to just come in to the offices, and I'll put out what offices actually are going to have people in there. If you want to come in and just do some practicing with the other agents, I think that should be an opportunity as well. We want to make as much, utilize this as much as possible. So hope to see you.
Great. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
And,
Karen, did you have a question?
No, I was, when I think it was you or Gary started, you introduced Elizabeth as new to the company. I was just going to say welcome to the company.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
do the-
Sharon.
Bye.
Bye.
And I want to acknowledge Curtis Van Carter, who is a loyal supporter of the training here. And he's also volunteered this year to coach new agents on certain MLS access issues, how forming hot sheets, how to best utilize the MLS to your advantage. Curtis has many, many years of experience. I won't say how many, Curtis, but and he's a bit of a techie. And he knows the MLS really well. So if you have a question, 40 years, he says, okay. If you have an MLS question, you're kind of stuck, you're trying to find something, you can't figure out how to set up the search parameters, or, there's all kinds of actually macro reports you can get from MLS that I've actually had them help me set up in my account, and then they're in my account and I can pull the data I want from my blog and so forth. But anyway, give Curtis a call. If you need his number, just reach out to your admin who has our Napa roster, St. Helena roster. Curtis is a part of our St. Helena office. So thank you, Curtis, for doing that. And there's his number on the screen. So jot it down. If you see it, 707-944-0421. And Curtis will be happy to help you out. Okay, have a great week ahead. And I'll probably pitch in on Monday and see how that 100 days is going, just to catch up with that. So good luck with that and have a great week ahead.
Thank you, you too.
Bye, everybody. Good
Bye-bye,
luck.
everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.